Good afternoon. It's Sunday, August 2nd, 2020, and coming to you live from the Lonely Tree Media Studios in Ellensburg, Washington. It's the Best Lamm Sports Show. I'm your host, David Lamm. With me, as always, my son, Parker. Say hello, Parker.
What's going on, everybody?
We are live streaming on YouTube every weekend, just about, and we're on Twitter at Lamm Sports, on Facebook, The Best Lamm Sports Show. You can send us an email at lammsports@gmail.com, and please check out our webpage, www.lammsports.com. You can find links to the past shows. The current trivia question will be on there. You can also leave comments. You can also tell us if there's something you like or you don't like or you want to hear more. Feel free to leave us a message, and we will definitely reply. I'm listening to everybody. So, I mean, you know, as much as I can.
Trying to, yeah.
We're trying to listen to everybody.
Not easy.
It is not easy. There's a lot of work going on. I mean, you know, I need to hire someone for social media. So, as always, the first part of the show is brought to you by the Range in Yakima. The Range is Central Washington's premier indoor shooting facility at 34,000 square feet. The Range is an all-inclusive facility offering firearm training, retail firearm sales and supplies, full gunsmithing and repairs, custom builds, and Cerakote services all under one roof. Go see our friends at the Range, 1701 Garrettson Lane in Yakima. Phone number is 509-571-1449. The Range, educate, equip, and empower. So, there's lots of stuff going on. Sports is kind of back.
Not kinda. It is. I sat down from about 10 in the morning to about 9 in the evening watching sport. It's back.
Okay, well, we had the return of NBA basketball. Yeah, we had the MLS tournament going on. We had a major injury in the WNBA. Yeah, we have MLB coronavirus. And we have college football players talking about not playing college football. It's been an interesting week. Let's just say that, to say the least, right? NHL's back too. And we're probably not
back right now.
We're probably not even going to get to that today. So
I have the Avs game on in the background.
Okay, that's good. Well, you can give us an update every once in a while.
Every once in a while, at the end of the period.
There you go. So I haven't had time today even to get to a trivia question, at least not a good one. So we're not even going to do that. So I know, but we'll get to it next week. I'll throw one on the website, and people can people can go look at the trivia question for this week on the website. But we're going to get right into the NBA because I think it was probably the biggest deal going on this week, if I'm not mistaken. And so the NBA resumed games on Thursday. The Utah Jazz beat the New Orleans Pelicans 106-104, and the Lakers beat the Clippers in the opening night doubleheader. The Trailblazers won their opener on Friday. They beat the Memphis Grizzlies 140-135 in overtime as McCollum and Lillard combined for 62 points, and Nurkic had 18 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists, 6 blocks, and 2 steals, despite fouling out. But it was Carmelo Anthony that hit 2 late threes in the fourth quarter that helped Portland get to overtime. Today, they really laid an egg. Well, for about the first, what?
They almost laid a real egg, but they still broke it.
It was almost worse. Okay, so Portland was trailing by what, 23? 24 in the third.
Yep.
In the third quarter. They were down, I think, 18 at the half, something like that, or 19. They were trailing by like 24 in the third quarter, and then they mounted this furious comeback. And they led at one point, 105-101, and then they kind of lost it. Yeah, they kind of fizzled at the end, and they lost 128-124 to the Boston Celtics. It was a great game to watch at times.
It was a great game to watch from the third quarter on. Otherwise, it was a blowout.
Yeah, it was ugly. It would almost be better to have them lose 140-100 than to watch them come fighting back, take the lead, and then just blow it at the end.
I'd rather have it this way. I'd rather be, because there comes a point where like you're losing so badly, you're down 20 points, and then as a fan you're sitting at home going, who do we need to get rid of? Who do we need to get rid of? Should we get rid of CJ? Should we get rid of Dame? What can we get for? We need this. We need that. When it's a close game, you don't feel that way. You're still like, a little mistake here, a little mistake there. We could win this game. But when you're getting blown out, you start questioning the whole organization.
But weren't you saying that in the first half when they were nothing
Absolutely.
when nothing was going right, you were immediately saying,
I can't
"Man,
tell you how many times I looked over at him and go, live and die by the 3.
who can
He's terrible."
who can we trade for? Who can we get?" And then next thing you know, they're hitting everything in the third quarter. About midway through the third quarter, it just became a different story.
I tell you, I'd take Jaylen Brown for C.J. McCollum. I'd even throw in a first rounder.
I don't know about that.
I would. Oh, Jaylen Brown's so good.
Maybe. But I mean, they were in the game. They did everything they needed to do to get back. Portland scored 76 points in the second half. I mean, if that's not enough to win a game, which it wasn't, then that means
Rocket numbers.
That means you did something bad in the first half, and they did, which was give up, 67 points in the first half and only scored 40 something. Right. Yeah. So it was an ugly first half to watch, and nothing seemed to go right. And I'll tell you who the problem was for Portland, who they couldn't. It was Enes Kanter. He was tipping balls.
Oh, yeah.
He was stealing things. He was rebounding. He was putting back shots. I don't know how many times I watched a guy drive the lane, and 3 Blazers are over there. The guy who was guarding him, and 2 guys are going for a block, and he slips in behind and grabs the rebound and puts it in. And I'm like,
those are brain lapses on the Trailblazers' part. What?
Yeah.
You've already got Zach Collins rolling over with him. Nurk, why are you coming over to help too? You know somebody's crashing.
Well, you can't get.
You need to be ready.
You can't get 6 blocks if you don't come over after every opportunity, right?
That's Hassan's motto.
they were going for the blocks. I mean, they were. It was painful at times to watch. It was a good game though. I mean, it was. As far as NBA games go, if you just tuned in late, it was a good game. It didn't end the way we wanted it to, but that's okay. So, Portland, yeah, now 2.5 games back still of the Memphis Grizzlies, who lost today to the San Antonio Spurs, 108-106. And the Spurs now move ahead of the Blazers into the 9th slot in the West. At just 2 games back of Memphis. Portland is 2.5 games back of Memphis. And then there's New Orleans, who's, oh gosh, how much is New Orleans back now? Well, it's actually Sacramento that is 3 games back, and the Pelicans are 3.5 games back. So here's the funny.
The Pelicans are collapsing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they lost their first 2, which were, I don't know, probably the hardest 2 of their 8.
That's fair.
Okay. And so the rest of them should be a breeze. But here's the question I have is that, so let's say Memphis hangs on to that number 8 slot by the skin of their teeth somehow. And let's be honest, they've lost their first 2 since coming back, right? But now you got San Antonio, Portland, Sacramento, New Orleans. Phoenix is only 4.5 games behind Memphis. Yeah. Now, assuming this all works itself out, but what if it doesn't? What if all of those teams are within 4 games? What if?
Well, then it's just whoever's in the 9th seed.
Yeah,
the 9th seed is the only team that gets to play for the knockout.
What if it's a 4-way tie for 9th place? That's what I'm getting at.
It won't be a 4-way tie. There's always a tiebreaker. There's a tiebreaker and there's another tiebreaker.
Oh, sure there is. There's always a coin flip, right? Google, brought to you by Google. I don't know. I feel like it, that won't happen because the teams all have a different amount of games played at this point, and like I said, Portland's played more than anybody by 1, so they have 1 more loss probably than everybody, which may hurt them in a tiebreaker situation. But they played well enough to get blown out, and they played well enough to win. And it's confusing at best for a Trailblazer fan when you watched them play Memphis, and they looked pretty good and pretty solid, and everybody was having a pretty good game. And then this game was like nobody could do anything for the first half. It's like they took the first half off, and not so good. They get the Rockets now on Tuesday night.
That's going to be a tough one.
That'll be on TNT at 6 p.m. Pacific. The Rockets, there's another good question. The Rockets, if I'm not mistaken, are the number 4? Hang on, I'm looking at it right now. They're 6. They're actually 6. They're tied with Oklahoma City for 5th.
Oh, interesting.
They're a half game behind Utah, both those teams. They are both 1.5 behind Denver. So they could finish anywhere from 7th, really, to 3rd at this point. Well, they can even catch the Clippers at this point. But anyway, the Rockets are one of those teams that I think the Blazers had their number for a while, like in playoff terms. And then all of a sudden, I think it was James Harden.
Probably.
Who made him not be able to beat them all of a sudden. and that's going to be a tough game. This is the hard that you now in the hard part of the Blazers' schedule. They've only got one other game against a team I think below 500 of the remaining six, so that's not favorable. It's going to be a struggle. Like I said, they're capable of beating anybody when they play well, but you can't take a half off. And had they even shot mediocre in the first half, they win that game easily.
No, yeah, they shot really poor. I think at one point I looked over the stat line and to Boston's credit, they shot obnoxiously well. They were shooting, I think it was 70 something percent and 60 something percent from the field and from three. Like midway through the second quarter, late in the second quarter, I'm like, holy crap, these guys can't miss. And then, of course, on the flip side, we were shooting 30% from the field and 25% from three, with Gary Trent giving us all of our three-point production. And it was like, well, Dame's 0 for 6, CJ's 0 for 5. And it's like, this is not great. This is not a good scenario. That's how the Blazers lose games, are when our scorers don't score.
Yeah, and I guess, I mean, Lillard still ends with 30 points. 9 of 9 free throws will do that for you too. But he was 5 of 14 from the three-point range and 8 of 20 total from the floor. McCollum only had 17 points.
McCollum had no free throws.
Yeah, 0 free throws. He never made
What the heck, man?
Yeah. Well, the Blazers as a team only had 3 people shoot free throws.
It's insane. It's insane.
I'm not.
You tell me nobody else got fouled.
I'm not sure I've ever seen that. Nurkic was 5 of 5. Lillard was 9 of 9, and Hassan Whiteside was 1 of 2 from the free throw line. So the Blazers shot a total of 16 free throws, and the Celtics shot 34. So yeah, I don't know. That seems a little skewed, but what are you gonna do? Anyway, they'll move on, and you got 30 points from Nurkic. Nurkic's stat line was 30 points, 9 boards, 5 assists, 2 steals, 1 block.
He had a huge game.
He's been playing great. Damian Lillard had 16 assists in this game.
Yeah, I saw that. That was pretty big.
30 points and 16 assists. That's fantastic, except it just wasn't enough. Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is that we had the lead. All that first half be damned. We had the lead in the second half.
Whoa.
Gotta close out games, guys. Nothing happened. I can still hear you.
Okay. So now I had to put the mic back on because we had a little technical difficulty there. Something started streaming.
Did I hear Return of the Mac?
You did. You heard Return of the Mac. Wasn't that awesome? Yeah, it was. That was our technical glitch.
What tab did you open?
So I didn't.
It had an autoplay sound.
I didn't. That was the crazy part. I didn't open anything. It was all been exactly where it was before, and all of a sudden it started playing.
COVID podcasting is difficult.
It was interesting. I don't know where that came from because I wasn't looking at it, and I had no idea which window. I had like 3 windows open. I had no idea which one it came from, so I just shut them all down. Yeah, not great. But anyway, so some weird things happened this weekend in basketball in the NBA. Since the restart already, the Pelicans lost their first 2 games, and Zion Williamson has played a total of 29 minutes. Why is he not playing? Is he hurt?
Dude's out of shape.
Is that what it is, you think?
So I said this to somebody the other day. I was watching him. I watched him throw down a ferocious dunk in one of his 5 minutes that he played in that first game. and somebody was like, gosh, he's so strong. I'm like, yeah, he's got that fat guy strength. You know what I'm talking about? Like the dudes who can, like, you try and arm wrestle them, they'll just slam you to the ground, but they can't run for more than 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And I was like, he's got big guy strength. I was like, he's got no stamina. He's got no longevity. He can't play a whole game. He's not in shape for it. And I think he went home and did whatever he did, when he left the bubble and things like that. I think that all set him back too. I do not believe Zion Williamson is prepared physically to be an NBA athlete, at least in terms of his stamina and his ability to play for a long minute. You need to be a 31-minute-a-game person to be a superstar, at least. And he's not even close.
No. He does strike me, even when he was in college, he struck me as that out-of-shape guy. And that he benefits from the fact that there's 27 timeouts a half.
Yeah, he can go up for a lob any day of the week, but he isn't going to run all the way back down the court. He's never going to LeBron chase down block somebody in crunch time when it matters after playing 15 minutes already. 15 minutes straight. He's never going to be that guy. He needs time. I mean, I don't know, maybe they're going to take care of him one day in his body, but I just don't think so. I don't see it happening.
Well, that may be the answer, but the Pelicans haven't really said why.
Yeah,
Nobody.
they're being pretty mum on it, which
Yeah.
is gonna let me take my speculations and run wild.
Do you do you think it has anything to do with his family medical emergency?
No, I
And
don't
that
think
maybe it
so.
wasn't a family medical emergency. Maybe it was him that had some kind of health issue.
Possibly. I mean, he might have had an ankle injury. He might have had some other injury. Maybe he's got asthma, and we just don't know about it because it would hurt the image of Zion
Right.
to have this type of illness or this type of ailment. So I don't know. I don't think so. I just think he's out of shape. I watched him during the regular season. I watched him be kind of like that. He played a little more during the regular season, but not much. I just don't think he's in shape. I don't think he's a good in shape person.
Did you see the Heat and the Nuggets play?
I saw some of it,
Okay,
not very much of it.
so two things happened in the Heat Nuggets game. We're going to talk about both of them. Well, briefly one, which was Bol in his first NBA game. And did you see him on the break making a bounce pass
Yeah,
to lead? Holy moly! You got a
good
7 foot
pass.
when you got a 7'2" point guard. Wow. I mean, not that he's going to do that every game, but it was a fantastic bounce pass on the run from mid quarter just over. It's hard to tell. He takes a step and he's 3/4 of the way down the court. But it was beautiful in traffic, led the guy perfectly. I was like, that is a crazy great pass. Um, Not that he's going to do that all the time, but I think he's going to be a really good player. I was really worried he was one of those toothpick players who's going to break in half at any point. I think they're
Chris Boucher proved you can do it.
yeah, but I think they're working on him to get strength, especially to bulk up lower body parts, which tends to be the downfall of the tall guy, knees and ankles. But yeah, I think he could be a good player. He can shoot the three. He can rebound. He's got that long reach. He blocks shots very very well. And if he can run like that, even just a little, occasionally, then you got yourself a player. Also in that game, Jimmy Butler of the Heat came out before the game wearing a jersey that had no name on the back, no slogan, no Butler, no just his number on the back. And the referee stopped before he came out for the tip. They stopped the game and made him go put a different jersey on. And I
Yeah,
don't know why.
I
That's
don't.
I
I
don't
don't. I think that they're going to look at that, the league, and they're going to go. They're going to call down to the referees and be like, "No, don't do that again."
right.
It's a number. All you need is the number.
That's all
When
you
you
need.
walk over to the sideline, you don't say Jimmy Butler foul. You say 2-2 foul. You don't. You don't. So why do you need to know his name? All the rest of these guys don't have their actual names on the back of the jersey, and you're not saying them. I don't know. I think it was. Either one, it was a referee who wanted to control the scenario a little bit. Two, it was somebody who just wasn't thinking. It was like, oh, it's supposed to say something on it. Go change that. But I don't know. I thought it was weird. It was a weird situation.
It was a weird situation, and I will just tell everyone that's listening. I used to do that when I was in high school. I used to come over to the scores table and just say, "It's David." Pow. Um, yeah. Anyway, it was. I just found it weird that it doesn't. I mean, I don't think it really matters in the overall scheme of the basketball game whether you've got. You just have to have a number so they can call a foul and keep track of them. And that's the only reason you have the number on there anyway, so they know who
Well, I
fouled
mean, I've
who.
seen other basketball games where a player's jersey gets ripped, and the one that he has to put on is a blank.
Hmm.
Like I've seen that before. I mean, it has a number on it, but that's it. It just has a number. When we used to, when I worked at PSU, we would take jerseys and things like that, spare jerseys, and they'd have their names on some of them, and then the other ones would just be a number. That's it. If they rip their jersey, they come over, they get a number, and they go on back out. That's it.
It was weird. That's all I'm going to say. It was weird, and I so far I've watched too much NBA basketball, way more than I normally do, I guess, because we've got an 8-game season basically at the end here.
Right.
And I watched a lot more than I normally do, and it has been really close. Most of the games have been really close. And I don't know if that's a because of the layoff and all the teams are kind of back to even and nobody's practicing and get ahead. The timing's off a little and everybody's just kind of a little out of sorts. It'd probably take them 4 or 5 games to get back into that swing.
Could be that they're not as finely tuned in
Right.
basketball right now. Could be that they're all finely tuned in basketball right now. Hard to say.
Right. Yeah, it really is. It's hard to at this point. I can't tell you what or why is what. But let's talk about WNBA for just a minute. And on Friday night, the Liberty played the Atlanta Dream, and Sabrina Ionescu suffered a grade 3 ankle sprain as she was driving up court. She stepped on a Atlanta Dream player on their foot, and her ankle just rolled. It was ugly. Um, and grade 3 ankle sprain, for anybody who doesn't know, is a full tear of the ankle ligament and usually requires months of healing.
Yeah.
So she may be done for the year. I would say probably done for their year, for their season. So their season's not that long. But that's a shame. She on Wednesday night in their loss to the Dallas Wings, she had 33 points, 7 rebounds, and 7 assists. And that was after I questioned the first game where she wasn't shooting worth the crap. It was probably just jitters, because even in this game where she sprained her ankles, she had 10 points in 12 minutes. She was on pace to go for almost 30 anyway. So yeah, I think she's definitely going to be a good player. We're going to have to see how bad this ankle sprain is. They said it probably doesn't require surgery, but those ankles are one of those things that can linger.
Yeah, it's always something you think about. I've rolled my ankles just a handful of times, and I now think about it anytime I make any sort of move on a basketball court. Anytime I cut, anytime I jump, I'm always like, whose feet are beneath me? What's beneath me? Oh, geez, it's frustrating.
Yeah, and I think every athlete who's ever played has rolled an ankle at some point in time. Not to this extent, but when you do, it hurts and it hurts and it hurts, and it'll eventually get better, but it doesn't, not right away. It takes quite a while for that ankle to heal. Every time you walk on it, you feel it. Anyway, the Liberty are 0-3 now to start the season and have lost their number 1 overall draft pick, so they're probably, I'm just going to say, probably eliminated from playoff contention after 3 games.
Good.
Yeah, it's going to be ugly. They lost today, so I'm guessing they were 0-4 now. Yeah. So that being said, let's turn our attention to a little more positive note for Portland fans. So the Timbers will be playing the Philadelphia Union on Wednesday night in the semifinals of the MLS is Back tournament in Orlando. After allowing a first-half penalty kick goal to Jesus Medina, Portland came back to win their quarterfinal matchup against New York City FC 3-1. Diego Valeri and Andy Polo each scored after entering the match as substitutes in the second half. Sebastian Blanco scored the tying goal for the Timbers in the first half and had an assist on Polo's goal that pretty much sealed it in the second half. I was worried after 20-some minutes and they're down 1-0, and they didn't really look good. Out of sorts.
Not a good situation.
But they definitely late first half and all through the second half, they pretty much controlled that match. And the Timbers in 2 games in knockout stage have only conceded 2 goals, and they're both on penalty kicks. So
good defense right there.
Yeah, no one has scored in the run of play that's only been on a penalty kick. So I think that's saying a lot for your team right there. And they're sneaky. They don't look like that team that's beating you, and then all of a sudden they score a goal, and now they're beating you.
Right.
And I think it's frustrating for the team because you're like, man, we've had the ball the whole game. Man, we've had more chances than them, and they just can't do anything with it. And then all of a sudden Portland just strikes. Boom, and there's a goal. And then you're like, what? And then there's another goal. And yeah, this one, 3-1, was a pretty decisive win over a New York City team that's pretty good. And anyway, it's going to send them to the semifinals on Wednesday. Philadelphia Union, I know, are good.
Yeah.
That's going to be a good matchup. Trying to get to the championship game, which will be next Sunday. So, you think they can pull off one more?
Well, I said last week, nothing would surprise me. However, I'm shifting towards being surprised if they lose. I'm shifting that way. I'm more surprised, or more like, well, that's weird, because they've done so well. They did. I mean, that 2 games ago wasn't a great game. They let up a really terrible goal. It took them to penalty kicks. They won it there. This last game, though, like you said, they just ran away with it from about 40 minutes on. So it wasn't much of a competition after that point. They kind of had their way, even without possessing the ball as much as the other team, or as frequently or as cleanly as the other team. Things just work for them. It would not surprise me if they won. I think that they can, but Philadelphia is difficult. So we'll see. Teams that are heavy defensive minded, like 2 games ago and like this game, it's going to be a test for them, because they want to score and they want to run.
Yeah, and I think well, and the other semifinal is Minnesota and Orlando, and I think it's unfair. Orlando's the home team. I don't think that should count. But Philadelphia beat Sporting Kansas City 3-1, and New England 1-0 to get to this point. So
Yeah.
we'll see how good they are. But I know that Philadelphia is, you know, pretty decent, and this is going to be a contrasting kind of game, kind of like every Portland Timbers game. It doesn't seem like Portland plays the same kind of game as everybody else. They play a little bit. I don't know what it is that's different about it, but it's more of a counterattack, quick punch. You know, you're not looking, and somebody's streaking down the field all of a sudden. Just
Seems
kind
a
of,
little off.
yeah. It doesn't seem like a well orchestrated effort, but they're managing to get the job done, and they're scoring. I mean, 3 goals is nothing to sneeze at. That's a lot of goals. I mean, most soccer games don't score that many goals. So yeah, so it's been fun to watch. Hopefully it'll continue. We'll see what happens. Um, so if you didn't see the Formula One race, the British Grand Prix from this morning, and I'm guessing that most people didn't. It started at 6:10 a.m. this morning, by the way. Lewis Hamilton won the British Grand Prix this morning despite finishing the last half lap on a flat left front tire. His left front tire was developing a blister over like the last 5 or 6 laps, and then eventually just popped as he's leading the race. And he managed to squeak across the line 5.8 seconds ahead of second place Max Verstappen. And Verstappen at the beginning of that lap was 23 seconds behind. So he had a gigantic lead and then lost 18 seconds of it in half a lap and still hung on to win. It was a lot of blowouts. His teammate, Hamilton's teammate, Valtteri Bottas, was in second most of the race until 2 laps to go. His tire blew out. His right front tire blew out. Wait, nope, it was his left front tire too. It blew out. Holy cow, they're all left front tires. There were 3 of them that had blowouts in the last 5 laps, and they're all left front tires.
Day for the sponsor Goodyear.
It's not. I don't know what happened. I don't know what was going on, but man, Bottas was in second until 2 laps left. His pop ended him in 11th place, and then Hamilton's didn't cost him anything because he had such a gigantic lead. But it was a crazy race to watch and a lot of fun. And I'm becoming a Formula One fan more and more every time I watch a race. Yeah, it's on early in the morning, but that's usually the time I wake up. So if I get up at 5:30,
for you a little.
yeah, I can turn it on and it's live. Qualifying doesn't excite me. I don't, they're like practice laps, and it doesn't do anything for me. I watched the qualifying
practice.
Yeah, I mean, really. And I watched a little bit of the qualifying yesterday morning and realized I didn't like that. And but the races themselves, short, 2-hour time limit. This was only 52 laps. A lap takes what, a minute, and took them a minute, like 20 seconds per lap. So, it's not a long race. I mean, if they're doing it, it would take them less than 2 hours if they just keep racing. But, you got some yellow cautions and whatnot. But there's literally a 2-hour time limit. And whoever's in the lead after 2 hours, even if you're under yellow flag, he wins. That's just it. And, yeah. I like that. I like that we don't just say, oh, well, we're going to complete 500 laps no matter what, right. which is the NASCAR version. And those take hours to finish. And I just don't have the time.
Patience for it.
I really don't. I mean, I suppose at a race it might be different. You could probably go to the race and, drink and eat and socialize. And well, you can't now, but you probably could have.
I can't do that.
I mean, as a social event, it's probably fantastic. But I don't really want to spend 5 hours at a racetrack or 6 hours. I don't really want to spend that much time anywhere, really.
I barely like spending that much time at home.
It wasn't, I don't know. Anyway, if you haven't watched Formula One, watch it. It's great. They're going to stay in England for the 70th anniversary Grand Prix at Silverstone. It's the same racetrack they were racing at this weekend. It's going to be next weekend, August the 9th. You're going to watch Lewis Hamilton probably win again. But it is still fun to watch. And to watch those pit stops, it takes them 15 times longer to drive down pit road and out of pit road than it does to actually pit. They pop that car off. They got 4 tires on in 3 seconds. And that car is back out. And it's fantastic. You're like, what? How'd they do that? It's just amazing. But it's a lot of fun to watch. And the crashes are more spectacular than anything you'll see in NASCAR, except that NASCAR has 20 cars involved in their crash. But when an F1 car race when it crashes, parts are flying. Parts of that car are just gone. It looks like a complete wreck, which is amazing. They can keep those guys safe like that. It's an open cockpit. And anyway, long story short, you should watch it. Everybody should tune in, watch one, make it, judge for yourself. So second half of our show is brought to you by Boss Kitty Hand-Dyed Yarns. Go to BossKittyShop.com for your yarns, notions, BK merchandise, or pick up a Boss Kitty. Kurt said they didn't have those anymore. The Boss Kitty merchandise. He said it's coming back.
Oh,
right.
So it's away for the moment.
It's temporarily. You can't get any merchandise, but it's coming.
Oh.
It's coming back. But you can pick up a Boss Kitty Shop gift card, and as a special treat for our listeners, they offer a one-time use coupon for 15% off your next purchase. Just use the coupon code LAMBSPORTS at checkout. You can also go to BossKittyLive.com and watch their show and see when the upcoming shows are, because they do a live show where they talk about everything under the sun and knit at the same time. It's kind of interesting. Boss Kitty, yarn so boss you'll knit your pants. Yeah. So we have a couple more things to talk about. Our show might be a little short today, which is okay.
That's all right.
We're actually right on pace. So the Korean Baseball League is still playing. Does anybody care?
No. I mean, yes, but no.
Yeah, well, so the NC Dinos are 45-24. They still have a 4-game lead over the Kiwoom Heroes, who have won 6 straight games, by the way. The Doosan Bears are in third place, 5 games back. Kiwoom has scored 58 runs in their 6-game winning streak, to include a 22-7 thrashing of the Samsung Lions on Friday. 22-7 that's a lot of runs for a quote-unquote professional baseball game. I mean,
that's a lot of work we're doing.
Here's the funny part of that Kiwoom was leading Samsung 8-7 after 7 innings, and they scored 14 runs in the last 3 innings. 8 of those were in the 9th inning after they were already leading 14-7. So I don't know if they were trying to pile it on or if that was. I didn't see the game. I don't know what happened, but it just seems like I don't recall someone leading 14-7 scoring 8 more runs in the last inning. Unless the other team just couldn't get an out.
Couldn't do it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's interesting. Those games are on ESPN and they happen real early in the morning, 2 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. So stay up late or wake up early, one of the two. So we have a couple more things to talk about. Let's talk about MLB baseball. Let's talk about the United States baseball for just a minute. Whew. It has some issues, and I would like to know what we're going to do. So the Cardinals are the latest team with some positive coronavirus tests, and I think it's up to 6 now. And there may be more because they only had those positive tests for 2 or 3 days now. So there's an incubation period, and at any point in time, it could manifest itself. So there's still ongoing testing, and who knows how many more. It's the same way the Marlins started. The Marlins ended up with 18 players, 2 coaches, and 1 staffer. That's 21 people on their traveling roster that tested positive. Yeah, and they had to send all of them home from Philadelphia on a bus. They literally sent all the sick people on a bus home. A charter bus, because they couldn't get on a plane, and they needed them to go home and go there, and the rest of the team stayed in Philadelphia. And I don't know when they're going to get to play. According to MLB website, their next scheduled game is against the Mets on Friday. We'll see if they're going to let them play. But the Cardinals definitely had 2 players, 4 additional members of their traveling party test positive, and they are postponing games like crazy. Cardinals games got postponed, and Cardinals games and the Marlins games, and they had to postpone Phillies games until they had tests. Now they got to worry about whether the Minnesota Twins, who the Cardinals just played, whether they exposed them, if they're going to start testing positive. It's a mess, and the Cardinals are supposed to play 4 games against Detroit starting on Tuesday through Thursday. Supposed to play Tuesday and then a doubleheader Wednesday and then Thursday. I don't know if they're going to be able to do that, but the commissioner, Rob Manfred, says he told ESPN's Carl Ravitch literally, and I quote, "We are playing. The players need to be better, but I am not a quitter in general. and there is no reason to quit now. We have had to be fluid, but it is manageable.
Spoken like a lot of people during COVID.
It's spoken like a lot of people who don't have it.
Right, who don't have the illness.
Right, yeah. Who don't know anybody that's got it either. So it definitely sounds like this isn't bothering me. Let's keep playing.
Right, it's not my problem.
And that is frustrating, I think, to listen to him say that. And now the players are starting to opt out more than before. So Jonas Cespedes of the Mets, one of their power hitters, he literally didn't show up for work today. Didn't come to the ballpark in Atlanta, and they couldn't get a hold of him. And then come to find out he has decided to opt out the rest of the season.
Blame him.
That's what's going to happen. And I think you're going to see a lot more players doing that, and I think it's going to be the end of that the end of MLB season shortly, when enough players or enough teams can't play and you can't schedule enough games and you don't have enough time to make it up because you've made yourself a timeline and a deadline to play the playoffs. You should have been probably more fluid in your structure to begin with. Yeah. But do you think they can finish? Do you think there's a way they can finish? Do you think they'll force it to finish?
I think they're going to force it to finish. Yes, I think that it's going to finish because they're going to make bad decisions. They're going to play with subpar talent just to get it done, just to say that, oh, see, we had a successful season. It's like, yeah, after all your players quit and half of them got sick and blah, 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 blah. But they're still going to chalk that up as a win if the season finishes. So, yeah, I think they're going to finish. I just don't think it's going to be good. I think the only thing that's going to stop them from finishing is if a bunch of different states get together and say, no, there will be no more baseball. We're not going to allow it.
And that's a thing that may come too, is that they're going to shut down and the state not allowing you to have those kind of games or gatherings. So let's back up just a hair. He said, and literally I quote, "The players need to be better." He's blaming this, is what it sounds like, on the players not following the rules.
Well, and it's entirely possible that they're not, that all of the information that they're getting is saying that, hey, this is happening because the players will not stop hanging out with each other. They will not stop, going to restaurants. They won't stop doing this. It's entirely possible that based on the information he has, that is true. I still wouldn't say that, though. I would still be a little better about it, even if you know that to be true. If you're Manfred and you know that to be true in your heart, maybe just rein that back in and not make it sound like, you think that the players are the biggest pieces of crap on earth. Like you've pretty much treated them through the whole contract dispute and pay dispute and things like that. It's not a good look for him to say those sorts of things. Players need to be better.
Players need to be better about it. Yeah, I mean, of course it couldn't be management's fault at all. It would have to be. It's got to be a combination of things. And if your players are not doing what they're supposed to do, isn't it your job as manager or commissioner to make them do the right thing? And
absolutely.
And if they're breaking the guidelines or the rules, isn't there a punishment, or just suspend them? Which is going to bring us to something else here. Did you see the quote unquote bench clearing brawl between the Dodgers, between the Dodgers and the Giants? Was it Giants?
Oh yeah. I saw it. Bench clearing brawl.
Oh, it was Astros. It was the Astros.
The Astros. Yeah, it was for the talking trash to him.
Yeah.
Brawl is the funniest word to use in the MLB because I have not seen real heat in a while in a baseball game. I picture thing I'm remembering is there was a time when somebody would get a ball thrown at them. The first thing they do is they'd rip off their helmet. They'd sling it at the pitcher on their way out.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, this is good. But then everyone else runs on the field and just holds each other back.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it should be like hockey. You should just let them play for 2 minutes, and then the referee should break it up and send them to the penalty box.
They're not built like hockey players.
I know, but I mean, that pitcher's got an arm on him. I'm sure he can swing. And anyway,
make a business decision not to swing.
I'm pretty sure that's right. It'll cost you a lot more money if you break your hand on that guy's face. Right. So the suspension that was handed down, which doesn't make sense to me, is Joe Kelly, the pitcher for the Dodgers. He's the one who basically threw at a batter, and
Yeah.
then he talked trash on his way after striking him out. He threw his talk trash to him on the way off the mound. Now, should he have thrown at the batter? No. Did he get thrown out of the game for throwing at the batter? No. No, he did
Yeah,
not.
if the officials on the field determined that what he did was not severe,
Right.
how could you possibly sitting in a league office determine that?
Yeah, and if you're punishing him for throwing at a batter, right? The umpire should have immediately thrown him out, and he didn't, so he didn't get ejected. So you're punishing him for something he didn't get ejected for, or you're punishing him for instigating the brawl, the bench clearing. There were no punches. It was social distancing brawl. It was a social distancing brawl. You know, everyone was 6 feet apart. But anyway, they're yelling at each other. You can't penalize a guy for talking trash to another player. It happens every game. That's what they do. So I don't understand the suspension.
Part of sports.
Yeah, that is the very crux of sport. You're trying to get in that guy's head, right? Yeah.
It's only so much physical. The rest of it's all mental.
But let's talk about why would you give someone an 8-game suspension in a 60-game season?
I mean, really, you're giving them a suspension that's equivalent to that 160-game season.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's a 20-game suspension, basically? Yeah. Which is gigantic. Now, it's a pitcher, and he doesn't pitch every day. So maybe he was trying to cover a certain amount of days, that he might pitch. I don't know, but still, I don't.
I've also always hated that. Like, why don't you suspend 10 playing games, or like 8 playing games, or 5 playing games? I've never liked that they would suspend people. Oh, you're suspending 10 games, even though you're only scheduled to play in 2 over that time. It's like I never liked that. I was like, suspend them an actual number of games. You have to sit 8 games that you were planning to play.
Yeah,
that's the thing. I never liked the weird one. What was the Oregon State guy who got suspended? And he was suspended like 14 games, but he was only supposed to have 2 starts over that period.
Yeah,
and so he pretty much he just sat around for a while. It was not that big a deal.
Yeah, it doesn't affect pitchers the same way it affects batters.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems weird, and I the opting out of players. There's been Lorenzo Cain of the Brewers yesterday opted out, and that's a big name. And then Isan Diaz, a second baseman for the Marlins, one of those few that didn't get it. he said, "Nope, I'm out." I don't know. I feel like there's going to be more and more as you get more and more positive coronavirus tests. More and more players are just going to say, "Nah, I'm good," and then your season, even if you have a season, your big name players, they're not going to risk all that, especially if they've got a family member at home who's compromised, or young children, or whatever, because these guys are still living at home. They're not in a bubble somewhere where it can be controlled. They have to take everything that they get at the ballpark home with them. I don't know. I feel like baseball's doomed. That's just my feeling. I think that this experiment is bad, and I think the NFL should take notice. I know you're planning on having your season coming up, and you're planning on the exact same thing. Let's travel from town to town and have 60 players, making contact with another 60 players from another city. It's probably a bad idea, but maybe the NFL will have a little better luck at it. They have a little more time to prepare. So I don't know. Do you think the NFL can pull that off?
I don't think so. I don't think anybody can effectively pull it off. I think it's too much risk, too much shift, too many little issues here and there that are it just doesn't make sense to think that you can stop all the variables.
Yeah, I mean,
there's far too many variables. There's too much opportunity for players to do something stupid, to do something wrong. There's just too much of it. And to think that you can control that, quote little Jeff Goldblum here, life finds a way. So
yeah, I mean, it is a Jurassic Park moment.
Right.
Somebody let the T-Rex out, and now
chaos theory here.
Yeah. Okay, so let's we'll keep an eye on it, and we'll tell everybody what happens next week, because I'm sure there'll be more developments and more positive tests. But the good news is the Marlins had 2 days in a row with no positives, where they tested everybody, and there's no new positives. So maybe they're over it, but it's not. It hasn't been a good look for Major League Baseball, and to have the commissioner come out and say, "Oh, we're not quitting. I'm no quitter." Well, okay, you may not be, but these other people are quitting, and maybe that should be a sign that you should be a quitter at this point.
It's also a bad narrative to say that people who make healthy decisions in the face of this terrible disease
Yeah.
are quitters.
Right.
You're criticizing a lot of people who are making decisions for their families. I don't think that's a good look.
No, it really isn't. So let's talk about NCAA football for just a minute. Speaking of things that may or may not happen. So the most recent development is that some players in the Pac-12, literally calling themselves players of the Pac-12, put out in the Players Tribune a statement and then a list of demands. Pac-12 football unity demands, is what they call it, to protect and benefit both scholarship and walk-on athletes. In a nutshell, they're upset about social injustice. They're upset about representation, not being able to be represented by an agent, not being able to use their name, image, and likeness to make money, not having a clear-cut guideline for operating with the COVID circumstance.
Big one.
Yeah, I mean they're going to come and then some of them are being forced to sign basically a statement, a waiver, if you will, saying that you agreed to come back, and if you get sick, it's on you. Which, yeah, I mean, it's become a big deal, and this list of demands, I'm going to agree with some of it, and I'm not going to agree with some of it. I want to cover a little bit of it. So, section 1 of this is a four section thing. Section 1 is health and safety protections. They want an option not to play during the pandemic without losing eligibility or a spot on the roster.
Right.
That would be a big one. And I kind of agree with that. I think that if you opt out, you should be able to not lose a season of eligibility just because you're looking out for your own safety. And especially if management, which is the NCAA at this point, or the institution, if they can't provide you a safe working environment, for sure. Because Major League Baseball couldn't, although they're blaming that on the players. So, but anyway, they also want to prohibit or void COVID-19 agreements that waive liability, which, like I said, some of those athletes are being required to sign. They also want mandatory safety standards to include COVID-19 measures, player-approved health and safety standards enforced by a third party selected by players to address COVID-19, as well as serious injury, abuse, and death, which I find is totally acceptable. I mean, I agree. You should have somebody. There should be somebody looking out for you, and it should be a third party. Now, players shouldn't be the only ones selecting. It should be a mutual group of administrators / player representatives. Call it what you want, but I totally agree that you should be looking out for, the allegations of abuse that are coming out in college now that it's more socially acceptable to talk about it. Iowa being the example. People telling you the culture at Iowa was terrible.
I'm telling you, it's toxic.
Yeah, and you should be not afraid to speak out when that happens, but you probably are because you're afraid you'll lose your scholarship, you won't be able to play, they'll kick you off the team, whatever, right? And there's no recourse against them. They want this stuff to be taken seriously. What happens when a player dies at camp, during training, during the summer, because that happens like once a year. Somebody's dying in the August heat when they're in camp. Who gets punished?
There's always one every year. Yeah,
right.
And the thing is that there are some things that are beyond control.
That's true.
They should allow players to not have to play this season. That should be simple, but it should be a whole season. All right? Or no, it's not true. That's not true. It should be. They should be allowed to withdraw relative to the advancing circumstances of your society. So if your county all of a sudden has a spike of 10,000 cases, yes, you should be able to stop. Right? There should be some clear-cut guideline there. If tests increase 15% in the city, you should be able to stop playing with zero punishment, without fear of losing your scholarship and all that stuff. I completely agree with all that. They ask so much of these athletes on a daily basis that, yes, they should be able to just stop if this thing advances in a way. You're allowing other people to. I can call out of work today or tomorrow, and they can't fire me for it. Right. Why couldn't an athlete do it?
Right. Okay, so that brings us to section. That was just section 1. Section 2. They want to protect all sports. and it basically says preserve all existing sports by eliminating excessive expenditures, which they're not wrong. So
Those are your coaches.
Yeah,
This
so
is where I disagree with them.
well, hold on. Larry Scott, administrators and coaches to voluntarily and drastically reduce excessive pay. How much does a head coach need to get paid? Does he need $5 million a year?
It's relative to how many athletes he puts in the NFL and how much they make.
It is right now. You're absolutely right. But
I think
does
what
it
should be?
Does it need to be? I mean,
No, it doesn't need to be. But
could they put a cap on it and say this is the most a college coach can make?
I think that would be your state that needs to do that, not the conference. The state needs to do that.
And
state employees.
I agree with that. Most of your state, most college football players are the highest paid state employee. College football coaches, yeah, they're the highest paid state employee in their state.
This is getting into a range of, all right, well, we don't want coaches to be making millions of dollars while we're making nothing. It's like, all right, well, how about we bring you in a $60,000 coach, and now you go ahead and win a couple titles.
Well, let me finish one thing. Let me finish this section because there's more. They want to end performance and academic bonuses. They want to end lavish facility expenditures and use some endowment funds to preserve all sports. So this, you can tell immediately that's driven by the Stanford athletes, since Stanford has announced they're cutting sports. They're getting rid of 11 sports, right? At the end of this year. Right. So in order to preserve those sports, yeah, I am absolutely on board with the fact that you could eliminate, that new $200 million weight room.
That is paid for by a donor,
sure,
not by the school.
And I understand what you're saying.
That's where I run into the issue, is that I do not believe in the putting money into a pot and then letting the school divvy up the pot. That's how things go wrong. And that's how these guys are kind of asking for it to go that way, which is when Phil Knight wants to buy you a new locker room, that has nothing to do with the school. That is Phil Knight wanting to do something nice for the school and for the players and the place he loves. You're kind of spitting on that and saying, nah, you should put that $200 million into a pot. We'll divvy it up and help keep other sports alive. It's like, well, Phil Knight doesn't care about the other sports. He could easily just donate no money. And then you don't get to keep the sports and you don't get the locker rooms. Like, that's the way it's going to go, is eventually if these donors can't decide where their money is going for certain projects, certain ones, there are big funds that they put into also. But for certain projects, then they're just going to stop donating for those projects. They're going to stop donating in that way. They're just going to donate the normal amount they would donate into the pot, but not worry about the special project stuff. This will hurt them. If the athletes want this, great. Let's give it to them. And let's watch them 4 years when their facilities are in disarray or they're having to do hand-me-down jerseys and things like that, like a lot of the other schools that don't have those kinds of money have to do. Then you can talk to me again about how this is what we wanted, because it keeps the 4 people for the swim team alive that you don't know, that you don't talk to in a different school, that your school doesn't even have swim. You're fighting for the rights of athletes, few athletes for a different school. I don't like it. You're going to get into a real tough area here.
Maybe. Yeah, well, and then also this is where the use of endowment funds comes in, which a school's endowment, which is kind of held in trust. Right. It's like a, what do you want to call it? A financial reserve.
Right. It's a specific fund that you donate into. When PSU does the big Viking Care, all that money goes into this big fund.
Right.
But when the Peter W. Stott Center is being built, that's money straight from Peter W. Stott to build the Peter W. Stott Center.
Understood.
It's a little different. Yeah. And that's why I think maybe they're not understanding how this is going to impact that. Lavish facilities aren't built on school's dollar. They're built on a donor's dollar. So, yeah, you can say that all you want, but this donor doesn't have to donate money and the school didn't pay for it anyways, at least at these bigger schools.
Okay. So, I am all for protecting all the sports. I'm all for, why are you cutting sports when I know there's money somewhere in your budget that you could make room for, at least paying for something. Somebody somewhere makes way too much more than they should. You know that's
Absolutely.
true. You know that's true.
Absolutely.
And you could absolutely save all those sports. But you're not going to, because that's not the way we do things around here. And I get that.
If you want to do that, then you have to believe, okay, well, we got to bump up club rugby to a full-on sport, give them scholarships. We got to bump up all club sports and make them full scholarships. If you want to protect sport, then damn it, let's do it. Every single one.
But it's not a sport already. That's my point. It's not a sport at the school.
We're making demands now. We're talking about protecting the futures of sport and things like that. We're talking about doing these things and being equal and giving the athletes a voice. Well, what about these club athletes?
Okay.
Let them. Why can't they just become a sport? Again, it's a slippery slope. You're asking for a lot, and you're asking for it in ways that take away from other people. Again, how are you going to win titles when you only have a $100,000 coach playing against schools and against conferences that have $5 million coaches and $5 million locker rooms and $5 million facilities? How are you going to win against them? You're not going to. And guess what? You're not going to come to this school if they didn't have that. Javon Holland's one of those guys. Do you think Javon Holland came to Oregon just purely on coaching? No, it was a combination of all those things. But if you take away a lot of those things, does he still come here? Does he come here for purely coaching? I don't think so. I don't think anybody goes anywhere for purely coaching. You go to Bama to win a title. That's why you go there. It has nothing to do with the school or the coaches or things like that. You go there to win a title. By extension, all those things are included. If you start eliminating pay from some people, not all people, some people, and the way that they're talking about it, because you're not going to be able to eliminate some admin position. You're going to have to ding a coach. You're going to have to ding their pay to make it public to get their approval. That's how that's going to have to be. You can't just get rid of some other position that no one knew who it was to begin with. You're going to have to make a public statement here with your actions. That's how you're going to get people back on board with it. I think it should just cancel sports for the rest of the season. Cancel college sports. No need. There's no need for it. You need to do some different things, yes, but there's no need to even try. If it's going to be like this, where the sports are going to be held hostage on top of the looming. So we do all these things. We bend over backwards. We start docking coaches' pay. We start getting rid of certain things, extraneous things that you deem extraneous, not that we deem extraneous, that you deem extraneous, and then you opt out because of COVID. I don't think so, bud. I don't think so. No, cancel the season. Let's just move on to the next one. As much as I love college football, I don't think this is a good recipe. If I knew you were going to play, I'd be more on board to help you, but I don't know. I don't know if you're actually going to play. And then we've done all these things to cater, because it's a catering. It's catering to these athletes, and it's just too tough. It's too difficult. It's asking too much in that regard.
So you were, I thought, in favor of what's coming in Section 4,
which is
name, image, likeness rights. Why shouldn't the players be allowed to make money?
Really?
Okay.
Within reason.
Okay.
Not volume, not money reason, within the reason of using the university stuff.
Okay. So let's get to Section 3, which is to end racial injustice in college sports and society, number 1 says form a permanent civic engagement task force made up of our leaders, experts of our choice, and university and conference administrators to address outstanding issues such as racial injustice in college sports and in society. Which is great. It sounds fantastic, but I don't know that you can address them all you want. I don't think you're going to fix them in a college environment at one college. You'd have to have every college on board, and
the entire conference.
Yeah, well, not just the entire nation. You'd have to have all of them on board in order to fix anything, because you can't fix. I mean, so the West Coast is fixed, but everybody else still sucks, and it's injustice everywhere else. Is that
what
okay?
happens when you take that NFL job out on the East Coast?
Right,
you're gonna be upset there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You can't just fix part of it. It's got to be, you got to overhaul the whole thing, or you're putting a Band-Aid on some of it, and that's not really what you're after, I don't think. Number 2, in partnership with the Pac-12, 2% of conference revenue will be directed by players to support financial aid for low-income black students, community initiatives, and development programs for college athletes on each campus.
21-year-olds making decision about 2% of the revenue from a school is not the best idea I've ever heard.
It probably isn't.
No, I mean, would you, as let's say you have an 18-year-old kid in your house and he's about to go to college, would you say, hey, I need you to decide what to do with 2% of our family's money? No, you would never do that. That's a ridiculous statement. And I get that there are kids in these schools who are much smarter than us, and I do agree that the money needs to be redirected in appropriate ways. I'm just not sure if the student athletes are the people to do it. Some of them are a mix of student athletes and non-student athletes, because are we just going to screw all the academic kids now?
Right.
All these demands that are being thrown out there so we can help athletes, and nothing's going to the academic kids? None of them are on scholarship. Most of them aren't. I'm sorry, not none of them. Most of them aren't on scholarship. Most of them pay their own way to be here, pay for their own dorms, pay for all that stuff. They don't have a meal plan. They don't have any of that stuff, especially these big Power 5 schools.
Yeah, but I think this is addressing the revenue from sports, right? So you're literally talking about something that your average student who isn't an athlete doesn't affect. It doesn't have any. They don't have any pull. They aren't generating any revenue, whereas these football players are generating revenue for the university. You know what I'm saying? That's where, and they want to use some of that revenue to help other, less fortunate people who are still trying to attend college, which I'm all about. I don't necessarily think you should be making the decisions to do it, but I'm not against it at all.
I like the diversion of funds.
Yeah.
I don't always like the who, because
Right.
the who is always the problem.
It's true.
I love the idea of a big community pot and everybody gets some. Who's deciding it is
Right.
always the issue.
So number 3 in this section is to form an annual Pac-12 Black College Athlete Summit with guaranteed representation of at least 3 athletes of our choice from every school. Well, and that's fine. You can have
See a problem with
you
that.
can have a Black College Athlete Summit. That's fine.
They probably could have done that before.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's stopping you from doing that.
That's a pretty easy one. You're going to do that on Zoom now anyway, so just start
Right.
a Zoom call.
Right. And then, so that brings us to section 4, which is the economic freedom and equity. So they want guaranteed medical expense coverage, medical insurance selected by players for sports-related medical conditions, including COVID-19 illness, to cover 6 years after college athletics eligibility ends.
That's a weird one.
It's interesting, but some of those illnesses, some of those things that won't crop up for 3, 4, 5 years after you're out of college, that you didn't realize you were, hurting from, I guess. I can see that. If you had a medical expenditure, let's say you went and played college football and then you didn't go to the NFL, because most of these guys aren't going to do that.
Very true.
And you develop CTE, you've got trauma, whatever. It manifests itself in 3 or 4 or 5 years down the road. I think that should be covered. I think that's something the school should pay for. Because if you were in college, if you were on the team and you had an injury, are they not treating you and taking care of you? They're absolutely paying for your medical expense, are they not? But if you develop it later, after you get out of college, and it was because you played college football or college basketball or whatever, they're not covering that. We're not going to do. That's your expense. That's on you. I feel like that's the way.
A little weak.
Yeah, I feel like the NFL has set themselves up into this situation, has set the example basically by paying people post, you know what I mean, after they develop issues or die from or whatever, and now they've got a fund for people. And I think that's the kind of way that they're trying to send this, is to say we need to be covered by things that are going to happen to us later in life. If I don't go play NFL football and make $1 million a year and can't afford medical insurance myself to cover these medical expenses, how do I pay for that? I'm okay with that. It's just it's a way you got to figure out the way to do it.
Yeah, it's just kind of a weird one it's going to put a lot of financial strain on a university, smaller universities, because this whole thing it's a gateway. It's a gateway for agreements for other conferences, for other universities, for other groups, and it's going to put strain on small schools. All of these stuff is going to would kill a small school. Would just murder it.
Yeah.
Well, and as if COVID might not do it already, this is a strong chance to do it too. So it's just one of those things where I just am not sure if it's all together or not, if it's all quite right or not.
So the second part of that is name, image, and likeness rights and representation. They want the freedom to secure representation, receive basic necessities from any third party, and earn money for the use of their name, image, and likeness rights. Which I'm not opposed to either.
That's a good deal.
It's so the representation is the part that I have a problem with. I don't have any issues with you making money off of it. I guess it's when you start involving sports agents that's going to make it impossible to deal with. It literally is going to blow it right out the water. Just because next thing you know, you're paying Patrick Mahomes $500 million for 10 years of football he hasn't played yet. Right. And I don't think I need a college player earning $50 million a year. On some Coca-Cola, Sprite, Adidas, Nike contract that he's making. You know what I mean? And no, the roster spot number 65 isn't making squat and isn't even on scholarship. He's a walk-on player. that to me seems a little unfair. If you're talking about fairness and equality, then those top tier players who are going to get deals would
Should
need
we have
to
their money go into a fund as
would
well?
need to share with the rest of the team. It's correct. Yeah,
Interesting.
absolutely.
Yeah, I actually kind of don't mind that.
Yeah, that's a tricky slippery slope when you start involving agents who are lawyers. Um,
I
okay,
think the way you kind of saw that is you set up a way to become a registered college agent, but you're not what's it called? You're not a pro agent. Like you're not allowed to handle pros.
that might be a way to do it. I'll tell you my idea in just a minute, but they also want fair market pay, rights, and freedoms. So they literally want to distribute 50% of each sport's total conference revenue evenly among athletes in their respective sports. That's not going to happen.
That's gonna be way too difficult.
Half the revenue. That's not going to happen. Negative. They're just not going to let it go because number one, well, if they didn't have to pay the coach, they might be able to, but they're going to have to pay the coach and the assistant coaches and all that equipment and a lot of stuff that they have to pay for. Especially at smaller schools. Bigger schools might have all that stuff paid for, like you said, by a donor. But at a smaller school where they have to buy that, we broke 6 helmets this year. We need to buy new helmets.
Right.
Yeah,
Helmets are expiring.
Yeah,
Helmets have expiration dates.
those are not cheap. I mean, that costs real money. And when you start taking half of the revenue, which isn't that much at a smaller school anyway, you're kind of dooming your sport already. They want six-year athletic scholarships to foster undergraduate and graduate degree completion. I'm okay with that.
I do like that actually, and I actually like the idea of giving them an extra 2 years of sport. Like you can't. I like the idea of maxing a 4 to 4 years, but go ahead and play basketball for 2 years after that. I don't mind.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm okay with that. That's good. I think that's a great one. I think that's good for the school and it's good for the.
Yeah. You can do track and field for a couple of years or baseball, basketball, whatever. I mean, or if you're a basketball up, maybe you just go out and play. I don't know. Find another sport, but you could find another sport to play for 2 years if you got 4 years of this and 2 years of that. And I'm okay with that. Give them enough time to complete a graduate degree, a master's degree in something. Anyway, that I think that's totally doable. It's going to cost the school more money, of course, to do that, right? Because when you go to graduate school somewhere, you're going to pay for it yourself or somehow. If you already used your scholarship money on you know what I mean? If you got a 4-year scholarship, you get a bachelor's degree, and then you go for another 2 years of school to get a master's degree, and something you're paying for that out of pocket probably.
Right, it's not cheap.
Yeah, so it's going to cost the school more money to do that, to have scholarships. They want elimination of all policies and practices restricting or deterring our freedom of speech, our ability to fully participate in charitable work, and our freedom to participate in campus activities outside of mandatory athletics participation. Well,
So I'm going to say a kinda.
kinda. The freedom of speech I have a problem with, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. Because it's all gonna boil into my solution here at the end. But yeah, I'm okay with them. They should allow you to participate in charitable work. They should allow you to work. Period. Just in general, you go have a job, and if you're going to go make $15 an hour doing whatever, that's fine. Why can't you do that? Every college student does that. That's exactly what college students do to make it through college. Why are you any different? So then let's see. Ability of players of all sports to transfer one time without punishment, and additionally in cases of abuse or serious negligence. I think we're headed that way anyway. I think most people put their name into transfer and it doesn't matter. They let them. They're eligible immediately and it doesn't affect them.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's a big thing to grant. I think you could give them that. They're already doing that kind of, and the transfer portal is kind of made for that. Ability to complete eligibility after participating in a pro draft if player goes undrafted and forgoes professional participation within 7 days of the draft. Let's say you declare yourself eligible for the draft. Draft happens. You don't get drafted, and as a junior, you don't get drafted, and then 3 days later you say, "Okay, well I'm going to go back to college." Do you think they should be able to still have eligibility? That's a tricky one.
Yeah, you start getting into. I do not mind. I don't mind it that much.
Right.
I don't love it, but I don't mind it. If it's one of those things that's a make or break deal for athletes participating in college sports, then fine. I say allow it. Just it's whatever. They're coming back. Not that big a deal. If anything, this hurts the NFL.
Yeah, it would.
If you're going to have these guys who are trying to go pro and then going, oh, second round, nah, I'm coming back.
Well, no, it's hold on. He has to go undrafted.
Oh, he has to go undrafted.
Undrafted.
Sorry, I must have missed that.
Yeah.
Part.
So.
Yeah, no, let him come back. Let him come back.
I mean, I don't mind him going back to school. That's probably the best option. You should go finish school if you haven't finished school at that point. I'm all about that. The last one just says due process rights, by the way. All right, and they're talking about people getting in trouble. Well, don't get yourself in trouble. You don't have to worry about due process rights.
I do believe that the schools need to handle issues better. I do not believe in. I believe that if you do something wrong, if you're under investigation for something, sure, you need to be suspended right away. Yeah. Absolutely, suspended from all team activity. Basically, that's the end of that. There's not a question there. I do not believe in kicking people off before there is a verdict.
Yeah,
I don't believe that's right. That's the dangerous slope of society, is judging people before we have all the information.
So not kicking them off, but suspending them.
Yeah.
Which you would do with any person at any job, probably. Right. Yeah, that was in that situation. Suspended.
Pending an investigation.
Pending an investigation, and then when it's cleared up, you either come back or we let you go.
Yeah, it's simple as that.
And that seems right. That seems like the right.
Look into it, found that you did it, and we don't like it. And not the school. It needs to resort and fall back to the authorities. If it's an issue of like academic integrity, then obviously the school investigates that. But if it's an actual criminal issue, then they need to be deferring to the justice system to determine guilt. Doesn't need to be the school determining guilt, and then the justice system says, "Oh well, nothing really happened." I don't want an investigation by some person at the school. I want the investigation to be done by the professionals who do investigations.
Professional investigators. Yeah.
That's right.
Let me throw something at you. And we talk about all this stuff and all the stuff they want, but I agree with a lot of things in here. Some of those things are kind of, whether I agree with it or not, you're never going to get it. Right. I think, what do we think about, how do we feel about maybe instead of individual representation by an agent or agents, what do we feel about a college athletes players union?
Unionizing, I think it's going that way. I think that's where all of this is going.
So, and then you'd have representatives from your union that would do the negotiating and not leave it up to sports lawyers to do all that stuff. You're probably going to hire one anyway. There's probably going to be somebody involved in it. But as a union, one of your players, college players, could be the union president or union chief. You know what I mean? And that way you've got representation from the players, and that solves part of your issues over here about your wanting your summit, your Black College Athlete Summit. The union can endorse that and set that up. And there's I think a union is probably the way to go, as opposed to, oh, everybody's on their own, go find your own representation and they'll take care of you. The union could then work on the liability issues, liability waivers. The union can then negotiate for revenue sharing if that's going to happen. I personally don't think they should do that. I think they should more along the lines of pay them like employees. Just pay them a wage and get it over with.
The problem is that won't be enough. It won't be enough. Because it won't be enough. Look at the NFL players. They were being paid really well or bad for a long time, and then it flipped. They started getting paid well, and now they're being paid very well, overly well. It's just a matter of time before, okay, well, we're going to give you guys, $30,000 a season. Well, why not 40? Okay, we'll give you 40. Well, why not 60? Okay, we'll give you 60. Why not 100? Like, it's literally going to keep going. Well, you guys are making millions. Why not millions? Like, it's a non-stop process there. I do believe you should be paid for your time, and I'm absolutely a fan of performance-based pay. I believe that if you're an All-American and you can get me 18 interceptions this year, yeah, I want to pay you $1 million. But if you're not going to do that, if you're going to be some fourth string who can't crack the starting lineup, then no, I really don't want to be on the hook for having to pay you some volume of money that I'm paying much better players. It's just a tough one. Straight wage is I think is the most difficult one, because it's just gonna set it up for, well, this isn't good enough. This isn't enough.
Well, none of it's gonna be enough.
That's
eventually.
very true. You're literally battling time here. Is all you're doing. You're just trying to
Right.
make things good enough to
As
last.
soon as you start giving in to any demands, it's not enough because you're going to want something else. That's the way demands work, and you can't necessarily. So as the Pac-12, what do you say to this? I mean, first of all, you don't know this. Apparently, this blindsided the Pac-12. They said they had no idea, and this was the first they're hearing of it, um, which is fine. I mean, I don't know how you react to this in terms of you can't be held, you can't let them hold you hostage.
Right.
Number
And
one,
I agree with that. They're holding the sport hostage, which I think is not. It's not. It means we're not in a good place.
right? No, we're not in a good place, and there needs to be some conversation, some talk. But I mean, you could at least start with um, whatever let's whatever the federal minimum wage is. Start right there. That's what everybody gets paid. That's the cap. Nobody can make more. Nobody can make less. But at least you're making something more than you were, and everybody gets the same, and it's fair and equal. It may not be fair and equal in terms of your eyes because I threw 36 touchdown passes and that guy sat on the bench all year. You're right. But life is not fair and equal, and you're in college, and get over it. When you get out and make $1 million as a professional, you don't have to worry about it anymore.
I
That other guy
agree with.
won't.
I said this a couple weeks ago on the show that there are some things that I agree with. I do believe that taking care of athletes after their time is very important. However, I said that there's an exchange that goes on here. You do not make money now, so that way you can make a lot of money later.
Right.
All right. You do not get to be an individual right now, so that way you can have your name in the lights later. That's the exchange that has gone on here, and it's gone on this way for a long time. Whether that's right or wrong, that's the way it's been. And I always say this: just because something's been that way doesn't mean it needs to stay that way. But also, I'm not a fan of radical change just for the sake of radical change.
Right.
Unless we have a great plan that includes votes from everybody, every college athlete needs a vote in this. That includes the tennis team. That includes the soccer teams. That includes the football teams, of course, and the basketball teams. I feel like a lot of what we're hearing is primarily based around what football players want and what football players think is right. And my concern is that, are the people on the water polo team sharing these sentiments? Are the
Well,
people in other sports agreeing with this, or is this just kind of the football team holding college sports hostage in lieu of everybody else?
it's a good question. Um, and what makes Pac-12 the conference of champions, or at least the Pac-10 was. I'm not sure Pac-12 retained that, did they? Anyway,
Oh.
anyway, what part of what makes the Pac-12 have more NCAA championships than any other conference is that they win them in tennis, in golf, in water polo, in beach volleyball, in things that a lot of schools don't have. Just don't have them. But your California schools have those.
Right.
So there's a lot to be said for it's helped bolster the image of the conference for years and years and years. And then for you to kind of cast them aside as non revenue and not really relevant is kind of wrong, in my opinion, because, well, we've been, as a conference, you're hanging your hat on, oh, we've got 500 national championships. Okay. Yeah, how many of those are in football? Well, 8,
8.
maybe?
Yeah.
Right?
If that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that the reason you can say you have more is because track and field, is because cross country, is because golf at those big schools, diving. Those schools have won you titles. Stanford and Cal, I'm talking about you guys more specifically, have
Yeah.
won you titles in every conceivable sport, just about. That most schools, that's the reason why they would win the Capital One Cup and have all those points throughout the year because they play 52 sports and they're winning points towards that championship in every sport. Whereas a school like Oregon is playing 12 sports,
Something
14
like that. Yeah.
sports,
Not
maybe,
many.
and they can't compete because their water polo team, which doesn't exist, is not going to win a national championship.
Right.
Um,
But I mean, everyone's voice across these sports is going to be so different, and that's the thing is that there are very different types of people that play different sports. Some of them cross between each other and some of them don't. But I can tell you right now, in my time that I've spent around a football team versus my time that I've spent around a basketball team versus a tennis team or a track and field team, those are all very different conversations. They're very different types of people, and you're having very different conversations. And they tend to have groupthink. The football players all kind of think alike. The tennis players all kind of think alike. But that does not mean that the athletes are all thinking alike. So I'd be curious to know more about, was this whole thing orchestrated by a lot of athletes, a lot of different athletes? Because it seems like this is all athlete driven. Because and my concern is that I want to do the right things by the athletes, all right?
Right.
And then within that and around that, and just as a given, we need to do the right things by the black athletes. But if this is just one group of athletes, black, white, otherwise, making the demands for every athlete,
right,
across an entire conference that spans the length of the country, top to bottom, we need to stop for a minute. We need to include all voices, which is what they want, is a voice. And we need to see what's happening. If the same results come out, cool. If they don't, then you'll know that this wasn't quite right to begin with. So I'm just curious to know more about how this came up. Who were all the people that were involved? How was it drafted? Was it kind of gut checky, or was this actually thought out and processed over the last 4 months? Like I just don't know. I just need more information.
Yeah. So the trivia question for the day then now is, how many national championships has the Pac-12 claimed in a little over a century of athletics?
Ooh.
How many NCAA championships do they have?
Can I guess now?
Sure. We're at the end of the show, so you might as well.
I'm going to guess 1,100.
Oh, that's way too many.
I don't know. 500?
It is 529.
I should have gone with my first guess.
529. They won 305 men's, 193 women's, and 31 combined. I'm not sure what those combined titles are in. But they have over 200 more than the next league. Right? And Stanford has won 123 NCAA championships in all sports. Yeah. So so for Stanford to be cutting sports in general, that isn't helping the Pac-12 necessarily. Not that the sports that they're cutting were things that they were winning in, but it doesn't really matter. Anytime you cut sports, it's a bad look. Athletes are out of a job, basically, and now are going to have to leave and go find somewhere else to do that sport, or they're just not going to do that sport anymore. And now what are you getting rid of? Maybe a potential Olympic medalist in something, or someone who might have contributed to your university in a different way.
Possibly.
Yeah. So you're getting rid of a chance to have a more.
They're making this decision. It doesn't matter. They just simply cannot afford it.
I understand that. I understand what you're saying.
That's the hardest part about it, is that they can't afford it.
They also have a $27 billion endowment sitting there that just sits there and earns money. So why can't they afford to use some of it to keep the sports and find another way to fund them? That's what they're asking.
They've never touched the endowment before?
They won't. No. It's the whole point of it is that it sits there, and that's what, quote unquote, the university is built on. These endowments where the money just sits there and they don't use it, don't distribute it. It's not like a trust where they use it and pay things and do things with it. This is a fund that they keep basically in a bank, and it earns money so that they have a guaranteed continued operation.
So it's an emergency fund? They don't touch it at all, period? Or do they touch the interest that it gets?
Probably.
Leave the bulk of it alone?
Correct. Each school would be different and under a different circumstance. But yes, it would basically be something where how much interest you're going to earn on $27 billion? A lot. So, yeah, there's a lot of money out there that isn't being used for anything. That's kind of what they're saying in one of their demands, is that you guys got a lot of money and you're either not using it correctly or you're not using it at all. And why can't you save those 11 sports from Stanford, which can't cost you that much to operate? I mean, a little bit, not compared to a football team or a basketball team. It's not the same. So, but they're not getting donors for those. Who's donating to the women's beach volleyball team, right?
Former Olympic stars.
Former women's beach volleyball players, and there aren't that many of them. So, and they don't, the women's beach volleyball professional tour doesn't pay that well, and they can't afford to donate.
And they didn't all go to Stanford either.
And they didn't all go to Stanford. That's right. So anyway, there's that. So it's a interesting topic, and I'm sure there's going to be more, because this is going to come to a head at some point in time when they decide, okay, we're going to play, which is the sentiment from everyone, basically. I think the SEC just announced they were going to play 10-game conference schedule. Is that right?
Yeah, everyone's announcing that. That's
Yeah,
yeah.
so it's kind of the standard now, but the question is, will they be able to? Will this? And the SEC is in a bad spot because they're in those southern states where things are booming or trending back up. Louisiana, Florida, talking about you guys. Um, yeah, it may or may not be feasible to do any sport, and you might just have to cancel. Maybe spring football was the answer, but I don't know. At least it would have given you time to figure it all out. But we'll
It's just
see.
not. It's just not. It's just not a good time for this type of action. I don't think is that in that. I mean,
No,
there's never a good time for it. It's going to be the argument. Well, when is the good time? Well, how about when we're not already dealing with potentially not having to play sports to begin
right,
with?
right,
Like, I really wish that this whole movement, because it was needed. It was needed. I wish it would have been done last year.
right.
Last year would have been a great time for it.
Well, yeah,
But I guess, the uncomfortable nation, bred a amount of civil unrest, and it just kind of here we are. We're at this precipice. We kind of got to deal with it. But I just think that it's all it's going to lead to is if they can't agree, they're just going to cancel sports.
yeah,
And then everything that you wanted doesn't matter because you don't even get to play.
right,
Because the crux of all this is all this stuff that you want is contingent upon athletes continuing to produce for the school.
right. Yeah, and
If they don't, you lose it.
you have to be able to have athletics, and then you have to be able to, you got to be able to play the schedule if there's going to be one. I mean, if the school can't even, if they're not even going to have a team this year, then that money's forfeit anyway. All that revenue from football is out the window. You just don't have it. So, and like we said last week, the Wisconsin athletic director Barry Alvarez, he said that's $100 million football revenue if we don't play football. It's going to basically devastate the athletic department. And I think that we're headed that way. And what'll happen is you'll have to start over anyway. Everybody's going to have to start over building athletic departments. Or you're going to be calling on donors to donate a lot of money in a time when it's stressful and people aren't making any money anyway. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to work out. We'll figure it out. But there's going to be more about it. We'll talk about it next week or when something else comes up. Next week, August 9th, 1 o'clock instead of 4 o'clock, I'm hoping. But I'll let everybody know via Twitter and or Facebook.
Sports are back, so I'm trying to plan this around some sports.
Yeah, it's going to be kind of tricky. And evening time is probably better on a Sunday, so you see all the games and know all the outcomes. We're probably not going to be able to do that when football season, if and when NFL starts, because that stuff don't end till 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock Pacific time. I'm not staying up that late. So we'll have to do something in the middle of a show, or we'll change our thing to Saturday and we'll miss college football. I don't want to do that either, if they're playing that.
If they cancel college football, that fixes it for us.
It will. It will fix it right up for us. But anyway, so next week we're going to talk about the NFC. Continue our preview for the 2020 season. We talked about the AFC last week. We'll talk about the NFC next week. We're going to continue to monitor the Pac-12 situation, see what happens with that. We're going to monitor the MLB situation. Season may be over by next week. Who knows? But definitely the MLS is back. Championship will be next Sunday. We're hoping the Timbers are there. We'll let you know. Come back and join us. We'll talk about all things sports that we know and some things we don't know. And I promise to have a brand new trivia question for you next week. And the show brought to you, one of our sponsors is Stave & Stone Wine Estates in Hood River. Go visit them at their locations out at the Broken Boulder Vineyard and downtown at the Tasting Room downtown. Call them at 541-946-3750 for more information, or email them info@stavenstone.com. Anything, last words?
Wash your hands.
We got to have something new. We got to come up with a new last words. Something
It's
different.
not a bad one until COVID leaves.
Well, we may be saying it forever. Wear your mask.
Wear your mask.
Wear your mask. I mean, there's no reason not to wear your mask. I know it's an inconvenience. I saw a sign. Let me give one little political statement. Saw a sign at a store that said, "Don't confuse inconvenience with oppression." Right? Please wear your mask in the store, because we reserve you. While you have the right to not wear the mask, we have the right to not serve you. And I'm on board with that. Right? You're absolutely right. It's a little inconvenience for a while to wear your mask. Just wear the mask. You can do everything you need to do if you just wear the mask. But people. Anyway, it's a freedom thing. I get it. I understand. So Anyway, wash your hands. Social distance. Be nice to each other. And everybody have a great week, and we'll talk to you next week. Again, we're live streaming on YouTube every weekend, on Twitter at Lamm Sports, on Facebook under the Best Lamm Sports Show, email lammsports@gmail.com. Check out the website lammsports.com. And thank our sponsors, The Range, Boss Kitty Yarn, Stave and Stone Wine Estates. This has been a Brain Rock production, a division of Lonely Tree Media. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you all next week.